I met a little fella by the name of War Pug from the Free World League. Loud and very ugly, living his best pug life. Had him dreaming of being a much warrior pilot, sitting on his grandma's lap and he's fighting composed. The boy was shy away from nothing. That's a jag. War Pug pointed at it. I don't think it's a cat. I think this person might be my dad. That's a battle master. Oh no, excuse me, my hand slipped and destroyed by accident. War Pug destroyed me again. War Pug destroying another lance. Like he said he would know, he didn't even apologize. War Pug did it to you. Are you little War Pug? Not like the kindest guy. Unsportsmanlike, shoot your legs and War Pug die. An eye for an eye, a man 5'9" and a hateful rise. Shooting DCK players like they shot Cujo. Little pug dog with a burgundy coat. War Pug destroy me again. War Pug destroy me again. War Pug did it to you. War Pug destroying another lance. Like he said he would, and then laughed in your face at the beginning. War Pug did it to you, and laughed in your face again.
War Pugs.
War Pug did it to you, and laughed in your face again. Like you say he would, and then laughed in your face at the beginning.
Guys!
War Pug did it to you, and laughed in your face again.
War Pugs, how is it going? And you might notice that things are sitting up a little bit high. A little bit higher than normal. The camera angle is a little bit steeper than normal. There's a reason behind that. There's something new here.
My drink.
Oh, the woman forgot her drink. 1 second. Hold on. Go ahead, sweetness. Go ahead. Oh, she's just moving. She's just moving. Here she goes. Ow, damn it, she hit me. Well, not drank. Even though I do have a drink. History of everything. You blame me for the recent spent at Games Workshop. Hello. I have a new computer. I have a new computer. That means I'm gonna be doing lore again. I'm gonna be an idiot again. I'm gonna be psychotic again. Yes! Yes! It's time! Anyhow. How are you doing? Lee, now that we're firmly in the section war, I'm gonna ask again, what's the IS powers, intersphere powers, excluding Karita, would you fight for? Honestly, dude, I'd probably fight for, none of them. I'd probably fight for the Taurians. That's just to be honest with you. Black Wolf, I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Gear Stark, hey, boss, when you're done with the second secession war, followed up with the periphery videos Sven has made. They're a good lead up into the third war in the 3000s. Whew. I'm in a yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, I'd be in the Taurians. That's just where I'd be. So new computer, got the monitor set up, had to reorganize everything. I don't know if I like the way where the camera is right now. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm hoping everything goes well, considering I just set this up and didn't have time to test it beforehand because I ran back and forth about an hour back and forth to town each and every time because of different things that were needed. But War Pugs, there we go. I am so ready. It's Windows 11. Valve helped me pick it out. I have a face for radio. Thank you, Christian. I very much appreciate that. I have a face for radio and a voice for print. It's awesome. Big Red. I'd like to be able to talk to Big Red before I did something like that. But today, guys, it's time. It is time. Huh? There he is. Oh, dude, that is not my fault. That is really not my fault. Hold on a second. I gotta show you guys this. Hold on. Let me get this up here. That is not my fault, though. Let me show you guys this. Come on now. Open link. There we go. Check this out. History of Everything is painting Ultramarines. That is most definitely not my fault. If it was my fault, you'd be painting Kriegers. That's what you would be painting. I'm just saying. Just flat out, it is what it is on that. You've heard of D&D 5th Edition and Pathfinder 1 and 2 fan-made expansion called the Complete Waifu Handbook? No, I have not, my guy. I have not. Guys, we are here for the war crime extravaganza that is the second Succession War. Sven Vanderplank is in the house. Hi, Sven. What's up, bud? You're gonna be up because it's after 2 a.m. Man, I'm sorry, Sven. I'm sorry. Oh my God. But it's because of Sven. It's because of Tex that I am going to be starting up doing some of my own Battletech lore. I do intend to continue the Officio Assassinorum series. I do intend, like, I already have a script written for before I start launching into Battletech lore. I already have a good amount of source books bought, thanks to you guys, because you told me about the source books on Humble Bundle. I got those, and I'm going to be putting those to very, very good use here in the future. The first video for Battletech lore I'm going to do is going to be on the first successor lords of each house. That is what the first lore video is going to be. It is also going to talk about the first lord of the clans, Kerensky. Before the clans were a thing, the last real guy that could have basically taken over the SLDF, Kerensky and the 5 successor lords. That is going to be the topic of the first video that I'm going to do. It is going to be improperly pissed off format. Yes, Mad Mergen, it is going to be a diss track. Yes, Andrew, yes it is, okay? Black Wolf, yes, your wife is correct. That is my favorite word next to huh, maybe, and God, you don't hear that word yet, Lee. But you are going to hear the word bell a lot because they attacked it 4 times during the first Succession War. War Pugs, let's get into this. The second Succession War, it is the end times for the good times in the war crimes. Make a vid making fun of Amaris or Von Straub. It's going to be fun, my guy. Let's go. The sad thing is those first lords are way better than the ones in 3025. That's actually disgusting, Christian. That's actually disgusting. Yes, it is wartime o'clock.
Yoguchi Kurita's return to Luthien after the near disaster.
All I can see here is the next Disney Princess Leia in the Star Wars remake. That's it. I'm just saying.
Tishomingo was a triumph celebrated across the Draconis Combine. Their quick action allowed them to snatch the coordinator out from under Davian's sword moments before they could land a killing blow. Despite the fact they had lost the battle, his resistance in the face of overwhelming odds was an enormous morale boost for the mustered soldiery. Those few months of uncertainty had caused considerable turmoil at court, however, and so to ensure that such a situation did not arise again, Yuguchi took this moment to name his successor. The coordinator
I hope not
thought
Imminent
little
One.
of his 2 surviving sons. Hugai was a touch too psychotic even for his family, while Toragi was a political schemer whose physical disabilities had kept him out of the military. In another realm, he would have been a fine pick, but in the excessively martial society of the Draconis Combine, he would simply not do.
So basically we have Hephaestus from 300, that's what we got here.
His sister Rowena had proven herself more than capable during his absence. Her ties to the ISF and time with the PRE made her supremely qualified, were it not for one simple matter. She was a woman. Not since Sariwan McAllister Kurita had manipulated and murdered her way to the top back in the 26th century and again in the 27th had there been a female coordinator.
Stephanie, you really don't have to ask. When you're asking who's going to be the worst, it's only between 2 groups.
Sariwan was probably one of the best in their history, was easily forgotten in their patriarchal society. Therefore, Rowena too was passed over. In the end, Yuguchi settled on his younger brother Miyogi.
Okay.
He had the military career, the political experience, and the right gender to appease all parties. Anything Miyogi lacked, he would surely have sufficient time to learn, while his older sibling held the reins of government. Of course, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry, and dragons are no exception to that rule. Despite his desires, Yuguchi would never again leave Luthien. Within the year, he was slain. What transpired was a near-perfect storm. First to feel the mailed fist of Steiner vengeance was Hugai Kurita.
Ooh.
Operation Praying Mantis.
Oh, I was waiting on this one.
This, begun by the mad Archon Claudius 2 years prior, called for the death of the coordinator and his barbarous son. Despite a change in rulership within the Commonwealth, the Lyran Intelligence Corps went ahead with the assassination. The hitmen perhaps played their hand too soon by targeting Hugai first. The attempt on his life was not wholly successful, though Kurita's life-threatening injuries kept him in a coma for several crucial months. When word of the operation made its way to the ears of the ISF director Malcolm Katsuyori, he zealously hunted for any Lyran agents hidden at court, spoiling any chance of their success.
How exactly did he hunt them? Did he just hang Wiener Schnitzel from a hook and just see what popped up?
Claudius's efforts to bring the coordinator to justice had come up short. Unbeknownst to anyone, there was a grave threat lurking in Yuguchi's own bedchamber. Of all the courtesans within the Imperial City, his favorite was the Lyran agent Snowfire. She had avoided the ISF's purge as she knew nothing of the planned assassination, belonging to an entirely separate branch of the LIC. At some point, word of the plot passed from Katsuyori's lips to Rowena's. She too was rumoured to be one of Snowfire's lovers. If Rowena was suspicious of Vanderham's private letters back to her mother in the Commonwealth, she did not mention it to her brother or lover, nor did the ISF ever decipher a code from the messages. Praying Mantis might have been stopped were it not for the fact that Snowfire was made aware of the operation by her safe contact. In her past life, she had been in love with a member of the 4th Royal Guards. Learning of their grisly fate was enough to make her act. For their part, the Freewells League rightfully suspected that the murder of the coordinator would bring about harsh retribution, in turn giving them the opportunity to make further gains on the Lyran front.
I mean, the last time a coordinator died due to suspicious circumstances, I mean, you remember what happened.
MWIO records suggest they too had their own operative embedded within Unity Palace. Performing the assassination would be no simple matter, but it appears Snowfire was aided in some way by this unknown agent. Perhaps they were the source of the knife she would use, or supplied her with keys that allowed her to move through the palace unseen. Alternatively, they could have been one of the guards responsible for ensuring the safety of Kurita's bedroom, who allowed her entry with the weapon. We will likely never be able to distinguish complicity from complacency. On December 12, 2850, Snowfire cut Yoguchi's throat while he slept.
Ooh.
She placed on his body the insignia of the Royal Guards, then drank a vial of fast-acting poison and lay down beside him. They were found dead in the morning. As per Yoguchi's wishes, his brother Miyogi was named Coordinator after his death.
Well, hell. Well, Joe! What's up, bud? You hear you emotionally drained? I hear you, bud. I hear you. Thank you, Joe Rogan.
His first act was to purge the entire palace staff of any individuals with even a trace of Lyran heritage.
There you go!
54 people were rounded up and executed. With his bloodlust sated for the moment, Miyogi began plotting a far grander operation. Like his predecessor, he would return to the infamous world of Hesperus.
Really?
"2850 was little more than a year of raiding for the Inner Sphere. The same exhaustion that had crept in towards the end of the First Succession War was starting to rear its head again. One of the only factions to make any notable moves was the Freewells League. They had hired the Myrmidons the previous year, sending them to strike at the Federation of Sky at Alioth and Kalidasa. This prompted the Lyrans to hire Murphy's Law, while the 12th Star Guard expanded to 6 regiments with the addition of Rippon's Grenadiers. On the Liao border, FWLM units were pummeling the Capella commonality at Chitwan and Ingersoll, while other troops moved to secure nearby Old Kentucky and Kalmar further inward. For their part, the Capellans launched a raid against the Federated Sons to strike at the factories of Axton, but
Murphy's Law is a pretty damn good... No, it is pretty damn good. Hey, Avalon, what's up? Joe, I'll talk about that later.
Suffered another loss when Davion took Pentvar. 2851 would see only a single raid against Ford before the Captain General's focus shifted elsewhere to deal with a humanitarian disaster on Hassad caused by an enormous tidal wave. Mercenaries would continue to be in demand as the Usik Irregulars formed within the Combine, part of Miyogi's preparations for his grand offensive.
Hesperus is the Battletech version of Zanzo. They won't expect it the 15th time. Man, the Italians had it bad in that time. Dude, what do you even... Like, at this point, I begin to just try to figure out why they keep on throwing themselves at the same targets over and over and over again. It is a big question in my head. Yeah.
Charles returned to his raiding campaign in 2852 with attacks on Hall and Wazet, but again he was the only successor lord making moves.
Yeah, true, Andrew.
A far larger effort would soon commence along the Lyran border, but it would begin with one of the few periphery actions of the Succession Wars.
Oh. Okay.
The
What's
Black
up?
Warriors had been a constant thorn in Marik's side since they were left behind by Kerensky's SLDF. To bring an end to this irritance, in 2853 the Captain General tasked the Eridani Light Horse with subduing their old brothers in arms.
Oh no. Not this group. Lee, not gonna lie, the Captain General seems to have gotten his head out of the sand somewhat. One telecom fafo later changes a man, apparently. Yeah, Lee, apparently when you've paid enough late bills... I mean... What do you expect? Yeah, it's the Light Horse. This is gonna go ugly.
Colonel Ezra Bradley, former hero of the Star League Civil War, was over 100 years old by this point, but he still participated in planning the assault.
Old age and treachery, guys.
On their way to their destination, the mercenaries would attempt to retake a pair of Steiner worlds, drawing the Triumvirate's attention away from their main objective. The operation got off to an inauspicious start. Though Magrez was captured, Charles's grandson Thomas was killed in the effort.
Nice.
Ilian proved more stubborn and not worth the effort given their true intentions lay elsewhere. In the end, only one regiment was needed to overwhelm the pirates, The Cercinus Federation was subdued without any significant fighting. The Freewells League claimed they were there to prevent the farmers from being exploited by the renegade mercs. But
Yeah, we're gonna stop them from exploiting you so we can exploit you even more harshly ourselves.
truth, later garrisons took advantage of the locals far more than the Black Warriors ever did.
Fucking called it.
A truce was agreed with their colonel, Angelica Chirion, that would allow the former mercenaries to join forces with the Eridani Light Horse and launch diversionary raids on Lyran worlds at the extreme end of the border. A much larger offensive under the command of the Captain General's heir Gerald Marik was about to commence, and trouble in the Protectorate of Donegal would prevent Steiner from being able to direct all of their reinforcements to the Federation of Sky alone. First to feel the wrath of the Black Warriors was Pancada on April 4th. On their way out of the system 3 days later, Colonel Chirion informed her Eridani counterpart that she had just received new orders. The two were to hit Bilawella, which they did on the 17th.
Okay.
Once on the ground, the Cercinus pirates returned to their old ways, robbing several banks while the Light Horse took on the militia.
Nice.
The whole operation had been a fabrication, earning the ire of Colonel Idris Majed in the process.
Hey, that is
Gerald
called...
Marik's offensive got underway
It's called economic warfare, okay?
soon after, and met with mixed success. Though they were able to capture 5 planets with the help of 2 new mercenary regiments,
Nice.
Willoughby's Wildcats and Xiao's Caissons, Devil's Rock was somewhat of a Pyrrhic victory, as the invasion force suffered around 60% casualties. Furthermore, 3 of the targeted worlds had managed to drive them back. Rising tensions between the Black Warriors and Eridani Light Horse finally erupted into violence on July 5th, while the two were conducting a raid on Starshine.
Ha!
Again, the pirates had picked their own target based solely on the value of what they could pillage.
Okay.
Initially, the mercenaries and garrison engaged each other, but a deal was reached with the Lyran commander that would allow them to work together to put a stop to the pirate menace. Majed personally downed Angelica's battlemaster, then stranded the rest of her unit on Starshine for the Commonwealth to deal with.
Nice.
The Light Horse arrived back on Cercinus on the 28th. Ezra Bradley would formally hand over control of the regimental combat team to Idris Majed upon their return. What few Black Warriors remained on planet were disarmed, though they would re-emerge as a threat in later years. In the end, the whole operation proved pointless. It was intended as a way to bypass the heavily defended Paulsbow and strike at juicier targets along the Commonwealth's periphery border, but no such attacks ever took place.
I know, right, Stephanie?
Elizabeth Steiner in 2853 was only 13 years old, but she had already learned much about how her realm functioned by attending meetings of the Triumvirate.
Okay.
Each one of her regents was pulling in a different direction. Henri de Calidor wanted to increase the power of the Estates General, but he was also somewhat of a military poser despite his lack of knowledge on such matters.
Oh, yay.
Duchess Eliza Atten had family ties to both Skye and Tamar, and was a strong advocate of regional power. Her mother, Duchess Rebecca Morgan, was firmly pro-Steiner and wished to see their control of the Commonwealth expanded. While all three frequently disagreed, they could at least function as a unified bloc when their realm was threatened from outside.
As long as you got that,
Their
you're
greatest
good.
challenge came on April 9th, 2853. Just as the Marik invasion was commencing, a Draconis Combine Admiralty armada arrived at Hesperus. The attack had been in the planning stages for many years.
Uh-huh.
Miyogi may have taken the credit, but it was mostly his dead brother's work.
Nice.
Spearheading the assault were all 6 of Kurita's remaining warships, the last of their kind in service anywhere within the Inner Sphere. It was a weapon that Steiner had no answer for.
It's a Baron, guys. They're using the Barons. Oh my god. This is the first time I've seen a Baron used this late. Everything sucks. Ugh.
The warship juggernauts of the other successor state navies had all met fairly ignominious ends during the Second Succession War. The Federated Sons Navy Department of the Line lost their last Congress D to a Capellan mine, while their final Nucertus class FSS Pleiades broke in two while journeying back from the front for repairs.
Oh shit.
The Great Soil class, pride of the Liao and Marik fleets, was picked apart by fighters its colossal mass driver was incapable of targeting. The rest of their fleets were either decommissioned or scrapped. The 6th Battle of Hesperus began when Taisho Susumu Fujiwara commanded the naval group to capture the recharge stations, swiftly crushing the defenses around the facilities. Over 100 aerospace fighters and 40 larger vessels were destroyed at the expense of 20 fighters and less than a dozen dropships. With the space lanes secure, he moved his force into orbit and began a long siege that would go on for another 20 weeks. This lengthy pause is why history books often break down what is essentially just one year-long campaign into 3 separate battles. The ground invasion, historically dubbed the 7th Battle of Hesperus, began in late August. Defending the planet were a trio of battlemech regiments and 6 conventional ones. Continual airstrikes over the last 5 months had significantly depleted their supplies and shattered their morale. A raid against them were a terrifying 8 mech and 15 conventional units, all under the command of Taisho Carson Santander. The war on Hesperus was a brutal affair that claimed the lives of many of the defenders. Throughout September, the LCAF was ground down, while the abundance of DCMS regiments on hand allowed them to rotate the units regularly to keep them all well rested. Efforts to break through the blockade and relieve the garrison were continually turned back by the massive naval task force in orbit. By the end of October, the Arcturan Guards and 4 conventional regiments had been destroyed. The rest of the garrison had been isolated away from the factory complex. Taisho Santander closed in for the kill on October 25th, but as they approached the fortified gate, the factory workers within sallied forth to meet them.
Oh god.
Baron Ivar Brewer had organized them into a so-called force of last resort, and this was that moment. The unit was outfitted with factory-fresh, or in some cases incomplete battle mechs, and though they had next to zero combat experience, the surprise ambush forced Carson to pull back so he could regroup. Crashing into their flank came the last mechs of the Sky Rangers, inflicting heavy casualties on the disorganized Kuritans. Despite the setback, the DCMS rallied and cleared the field of the last Steiner holdouts. After 5 failed attempts, it looked as if the production lines on Hesperus were finally going to fall. Kurita would make use of the facility themselves until a sufficiently strong counterattack dislodged them, but no doubt they would sabotage the complex on their way out to ensure it could no longer be used to support the Lyran war effort. This would have been the likely outcome had not Henri de Calidor suggested a bold plan back in September. The decommissioned LCS Invincible had been moved to Tharkad some years earlier, now serving as nothing more than a museum piece, but could feasibly be brought back into service. The biggest problem would be crewing the battlecruiser, as the only naval officers with experience fighting in such a vessel had long since retired.
Bring their asses back! For the
second time in the war, the Commonwealth turned to their oldest veterans for their salvation. While they trained together for the upcoming battle, the Lyran garrison was paying a heavy price in blood to protect the Defiance Industries factory. As Santander was closing on the facility below, the Invincible had materialized overhead, beginning the 8th Battle of Hesperus. The DCA warships had a distinct numbers advantage, but their largest vessel was a Baron-class destroyer, barely half the size of their opponent.
And it's a Baron-class destroyer, barely half the worth of its contemporaries.
Furthermore, not one shipyard remained in operation that could still service such massive naval juggernauts, and so their warships were all in a miserable state of repair. Invincible blasted its way through DCS Yedo, while its fighters picked apart the aging Vigilant-class DCS Worm. But the battlecruiser took no notice of the remaining vessels as the crew centered their weapons on the battle raging below. Victory for House Kurita was within their grasp, but at that moment, the Combine mechs were transported back in time to the original invasion of 2787 and got to experience firsthand the horrors their predecessors had during the First Succession War, as massed orbital fire rained down on top of them. The survivors, of which there were few, scattered into the mountains, while the crew of LCS Invincible turned back to more pressing matters.
Nice!
The bypassed warships had maneuvered behind her and trapped the Tharkad class in low orbit. Any other ship might have accepted the inevitable, but not that crew. In a masterclass of naval warfare, the Invincible battled their way free.
Nice!
As each ship tried in vain to land the killing shot, they came into range of her massive weapons arsenal, and each in turn was explosively disassembled.
I like the way he said explosively disassembled there. Oh yeah, they got fucking murdered.
By mid-November, it was clear to Miyogi that a victory was no longer possible, and he angrily called for a retreat.
Ha!
10 regiments had been lost in the assault, almost half their force.
Oh!
The Lyrans had suffered far worse. 90% of their materiel was destroyed, with 70% casualties across the board.
Oof.
For their sacrifice, the Force of Last Resort, of which only 5 individuals had survived, was awarded the Dragon Slayer's ribbon. Brewer was given the Medal of Honor and made Duke of Hesperus for his crucial role in assembling the ad hoc battalion.
Nice!
The story of the LCS Invincible, the Ionosphere's last warship, is legendary, but the ending is not what anyone would have wished for. On the return voyage to Tharkad, the ancient vessel's jump drive malfunctioned, and the ship with her crew vanished from existence. No trace of them has ever been found.
F in chat, guys.
It's often said that with her disappearance, warships as a whole passed into legend. This is essentially true, but not wholly accurate. Ignoring the discovery and subsequent destruction of SLS Tirpitz in the late 30th century, and the never-ending rumours of a hidden ComStar fleet, 2 nations are still known to possess warships in 3025. The first is the Taurian Concordat, where the decaying hulk of TCS Vandenberg can be found deep inside the Hades cluster. The Taurians have often mentioned their desire to bring this ancient Vincent-class corvette back into service and reclaim their former status as a naval power, but the cost of doing so would likely bankrupt the realm.
Damn.
The second is the Draconis Combine. 2 or 3 of the advanced Narukami-class destroyers had already been decommissioned before the Second Succession War was even underway. The damage was extensive, and the enormous repair bill unjustifiable. 2 centuries of decay have only compounded those issues. These days, the derelicts drift aimlessly through space, and are almost certainly beyond the abilities of the Kuritans to restore.
Nice.
More famously, DCS Togura still orbits above the ancestral home of House Kurita. Even before the battle at Hesperus, this Samarkand-class carrier was written off as being unspaceworthy, and has long since been abandoned. The warship lingers on as a curiosity, a reminder of a bygone era perhaps best left in the past. It remains unclear as to whether such awesomely destructive vessels will ever be constructed again.
Oh, excellent chat for the Invincible, guys. Christian, okay, with no more warships operational, what would a dominant Mercury class Galactica do now? Join a Merc company for the money? Hell's yes, Christian. They would most definitely join a Merc company for the money. I don't even think they would. Like, okay, so with all the lost knowledge, it's going to be time. It's only a matter of time before warships take back over warfare in the Battletech universe. The question is, how long is that going to take? because the current state of the galaxy is one continuous state of stagnation. It is what it is. ComStar and the clans have warships, but the clans are fucking stupid. They really are stupid. Alcius, how powerful would decommissioned warships be in the modern world if forced to use them in war? Thank you, Christian. Much appreciated, dude. Well, it depends on the warship, okay? It really depends on the warship. There is... the technology gaps between generations of warship are vast. But as long as you're not going too far back, you can still find some use in a warship. We were still using battleships for shore bombardment. And to be honest, if you outfitted a battleship, you retrofitted a battleship with enough anti-missile systems, it could still be partially effective. But the focus these days, as far as naval warfare goes, is much more centralized towards air power than anything else. Air power determines engagements right now. The force of a fleet is... we have not had two navies of equal power engage each other in modern history. We just haven't had that. The closest we came was the Falklands. That was the closest we actually had. But nothing past that. And I say the Falkland Islands because the Argentinians and the British, even though the British had technological superiority, that was actually the closest in terms of power projection, in terms of fleet power, that has actually been, relevant. We haven't had a fleet engagement of equal strength yet, so the focus has been on our air power. Yeah, true, Stephanie, true. The focus has been completely towards air power, but every simulation shows if two navies of equal strength met up, it would be essentially a missile slugfest. But the second that air power gets involved, it all goes to hell. X in chat for the Invincible, guys. Let's get going. Let's continue. That's not a problem, Christian. That's a joyous occasion. Now feed little man, Black Wolf.
In 2853, House Humphreys reclaimed the planet Cursor.
And I'll just say it like this. The last time the United States Navy got pissed off enough to do something was called Operation Praying Mantis, and Iran had a fairly substantial navy for the region and got curb stomped so hard.
This had been the location from which SAFE had carried out Operation Cookie Jar, fabricating the existence of an SLDF cache and triggering the ComStar War. The Terran communications cult had been eerily quiet in the years since Raymond Karpov called an end to Operation Holy Shroud back in
when the Amish became wizards
in 2845. The successor states had lost faith in their neutrality, and so perhaps they were trying to avoid doing anything that might draw further attention to themselves. In an ironic twist, just one jump away from Cursor, a real weapons stockpile was discovered within the Foghorn Highlands on Lopez. The Primus had made it his mission to secure or destroy any facilities containing Starleague-era technology, and so dispatched a ROM team to Lopez while leaking word of the find to Liao on August 12th. When the CCAF arrived 3 weeks later, the ROM agents used the ensuing battle as cover to detonate the entire complex, keeping the priceless artifacts out of the hands of both successor states.
Nice.
The success on Lopez perhaps encouraged Karpov to renew his efforts to subvert the Great Houses. He believed that the indoctrination of Jeanette Marik, an intention to use her as a puppet ruler,
What the hell do you guys want? I'm trying to play StarCraft.
Was a good plan fumbled by his predecessor Toyama. The next year, he would task his organization with finding other heirs who he might be able to bring into the fold. Fighting on the Capellan front carried on into 2854. La Reconquista pushed into the Cyan Commonality, taking Ipswich, Lukla, and Sappho, but the FWLM overreached by trying to grab Gudna too. The Northwind Highlanders beat them back, but lost a battalion in the effort. This was a rare victory for House Liao at this stage in the war, as Capellan logistics.
Guys, Black Lorgar is here, and he apparently did not bring everything. Everybody, give Black Lorgar his L, please. L in chat for Black Lorgar.
Were on the verge of collapse. They could barely supply their forces at their current garrisons, let alone move troops around for an offensive. No matter their recent successes, few within the Freewells League could celebrate in 2854. It would in fact be a year of mourning. On March 9th, Captain General Charles Marik passed away after almost 33 years in office.
Oh.
His reign is a divisive one amongst historians.
Yeah?
In a single year, he reversed every gain the League had made during the First Succession War that billions had died fighting for. He brought the wrath of ComStar onto his nation and allowed Parliament to run amok, nearly causing the destruction of his realm. These actions taken out of context look atrocious, but they only tell half the story. Charles's legacy is one of recovery in the face of insurmountable odds. In his first decade, he wisely focused post-war rebuilding efforts on the military, had no desire to get dragged into yet another succession war, worked to mitigate one of the League's biggest shortcomings in their intelligence agency, and for his efforts was duped into launching a preemptive strike to secure his territory. He then faced off with Konrad Toyama, the secret power behind the entire conflict. Marik called his bluff, and though he ultimately capitulated, Toyama was himself ruined by Charles's defiance. His MPs never believed his justification for the attack on the HBG at Oriente, and as such turned against him. Even still, his actions up to that point had won him allies among the nobility, rebuilding a relationship which his father Thaddeus had all but destroyed. His sons.
Thank you, Joe Rogan. If anybody is interested in the Battletech animated series from 1994, there are at least 3 channels on YouTube that have the first 13 episodes on their channel. Nice, Joe. Nice. They're like the Steiners. Their family is huge. Yeah, Stephanie. Their
and daughter
There's
and
a lot
their
of
children
Mariks.
too followed his example to enlist, fighting at the front lines alongside their soldiers in a way that few ruling families do, and many had given their lives in the effort. Charles's legacy is a complicated one, not without missteps, but in my estimation, he deserves a place alongside his grandfather Kenyon and
Look at that face! Seriously! Why? How smug can one person be?
their ancestors Albert and Marion as 4 of the finest leaders the Freewells League has seen.
Thank you, Joe.
When word of his passing reached the front line, his eldest and only surviving son Gerald returned back to Atreus to be sworn in as the new Captain General. He was there for only 9 weeks before departing back to the front in order to lead the next wave of attacks against Steiner, leaving the governance of the realm in the trustworthy hands of Joost van Kamp. Alhina, Oliver and Wing were all taken that year, but Callison rebuffed their efforts. Nearby, the 12th Star Guard achieved their greatest extent with the addition of a 7th Regiment, Dunderdale's Ironmen, making them by far the largest mercenary unit in existence at that moment, almost double their nearest rivals, the Elysian Rangers and Northwind Highlanders. The ruling family was not wholly united behind the new Captain General. His son Maxwell refused to be named heir, and instead declared his intention to follow in his great-aunt's footsteps by joining ComStar, later rising to the rank of Precentor. This was the first real coup of Karpov's latest scheme, and showed that not everyone within the Great House had accepted Charles's justification.
Dost thou accept the holy iPhone 4?
For the attack on his sister's HBG
I don't even know what to say about this image. Just like, seriously. You're a fucking phone company.
station. Maxwell would not be the last Marik to be initiated into the ComStar order. Miyogi Kurita's campaign to take control of Hesperus may have ended unsuccessfully, but this was far from the only operation he had planned. 2854 saw the beginning of what would become known as the Marathon Offensive. The DCMS would move against both of their rivals more or less simultaneously, but we'll review the Lyran front first. The Warlord of Benjamin had been busy conducting their own minor campaign, expanding by another 2 systems in the years since the new coordinator came to power.
Okay.
In time, Camlanshire would become the focal point of the operation, but initially the campaign stretched along the entire length of the border, with no particular goal other than to seize whatever they could. Incursions into the Federation of Sky were
With the AdMech by Microsoft Vista? I think you would be executed for heresy if you brought them Microsoft Vista. Because they would be like, there's no way that this was made by humankind. This was made by a hostile Xenos race. You shall atone. You shall atone and be broken by the wheel. And you will install Linux.
driven back, with a raid on Constance being the only tangible success, but moves against the Tamar Pact showed more promise. Port Moresby and Satellitcha held on, but a raid on Battletech revealed a weakness there that a second attack soon exploited. On the periphery end of the border, Planting and Ridderkirk changed hands. The Federated Suns half of the Marathon Offensive commenced with a raid in force on the infamous world of Kintari 4. The garrison there was near fanatical in their defense, as might be expected, but this worked to Kurita's favor.
I would leave that planet completely the fuck alone. If I was Kurita and I conquered the rest of the Inner Sphere, I would leave that planet alone. Just no.
He exploited their desire to hunt down the evasive DCMS forces sent there, drawing ever more of the region's AFFS into what was only ever meant to be a diversion. The campaign would begin in earnest on June 10th, with an attack on Franklin and Lucerne, the latter of which would be the first outing for Big Kev's brigade, hired by the DCMS the previous year. Their weight in numbers helped offset their inexperience, and by the third month, Lucerne as well as Franklin were both secured.
Excellent Chattanooga Avalon.
Other Kuritan units unleashed hell on Ballantine, eradicating the Davian presence and virtually everything else on planet. Elsewhere, the invasions of Karnak and LeBlanc, which began the final string of attacks in mid-July, were driven back, the latter defeat coming on New Year's Day. Rochester proved another tough nut to crack. The battle raged for 11 months until the arrival of Big Kev's brigade turned the tables in their favour. The primary objective of the entire offensive, though, was the capture of Robinson. The Draconis March capital was hugely important to the defence of the region, and yet, since the fall of the Star League, had spent almost as much time under Kuritan occupation as under House Sandoval's own control.
True.
Coordinator Miyogi Kurita himself would lead the attack at the head of almost the entire Sword of Light Brigade, supported by an additional 10 regiments of conventional forces. They were evenly matched by Field Marshal Jerome Davian's force, who possessed only one fewer battlemech unit. Despite the relative parity in numbers, the skill of the Sword of Light started to shine through, and Davian soon found himself on the back foot. He repeatedly called for reinforcements, but so much was being dispatched to Kantari, what little did trickle in wasn't enough to offset his losses. Jerome's battle was only just beginning in 2854, and the planet would suffer immensely before it was over. In December.
Thank you, Christian. If ComStar wanted to sabotage the militaries, they would give PowerPoint. No officer would have time to fight. That is excessively true. That is stupidly true. The STC for PowerPoint would crash Battletech.
December,
Thank you,
the
Christian.
DCMS next struck at Sonmin, then DeWitt in February, and Kestrel in July. The goal was to push right through to New Avalon, but believing such a thing was possible at this stage in the war was beyond optimistic. Every Kuritan was chased off in due course.
Nice.
The only gains they did make in 2855 came closer to the border, Al-Nadal and Kosa. The Lyran half of the offensive, now aided by the Red Baron's mercenary battalion, focused on the Tamar Pact in 2855, taking 4 more systems for Kurita, then a 5th when they converted their raid on Kellenfold to an occupation, creating
the word of Blake uses Temple Oath. Really?
an outrageously deep salient into the Kelswar realm.
Oh.
Only Moritz put up a resistance, though there was some small consolation for Steiner when a counterattack on Orbison by the newly hired Final Reckoning saw one of their first succession war losses reversed. Gerald Marik's main objective for the year was to rebuild the Syrian Concordance. All 3 of their lost systems were wrestled out of the hands of either the Capellans or Lyrans.
There we go.
The former tried to curtail any further losses by augmenting their forces with another Merc unit, Damage Inc. The Andurian conflict continued as well, with Humphreys winning another 5 planets for their growing duchy, though 3 of those would be deemed inhospitable and abandoned by war's end. They followed this up in 2856 with 2 more conquests, though Rosendahl resisted their advances for the time being.
Wow. Hold on a second. Come on back to that.
Rosendahl resisted their advances for the time being.
Look at that salient. Like, right there. Like, I have this one, and then there's this one. I thought the last one was a big deal.
The LCAF's defense was firming up across the realm in 2856, as they yet again beat back attempts by Kurita to take Mor and Satellitsha. With their morale boosted by these victories, Steiner caught the Draconis Combine off guard when they advanced into their territory, taking back the vulnerable Kellenfold a year after its capture, and also seizing Buckminster and Vega, the latter thanks to help from their newest mercs, Beck's battalion. Trolloc Prime proved too much for them at the moment, but they were not disheartened.
Oh my god, Andrew.
The Marathon Offensive had become a bit of a damp squib. The armed forces of the Federated Suns countered every move the DCMS made in 2856. An attack on Solturul in January began the year, but went nowhere. Donoval and Raman held on, and in January the AFFS finally secured a victory on Kintari, though it was one that had cost them dearly. Even though Peter Davian's forces were holding their ground, the campaign was grinding them down. No one was in any sort of position to relieve the forces on Robinson. By 2857, the writing was on the wall for the Draconis March capital, and the AFFS began withdrawing their mercenaries from the planet. They immediately began looking for opportunities to employ them elsewhere, with the Xi'an hotheads launching a successful strike against Bene 3 in April. Kurita wasn't willing to give up the world yet, but a counter-invasion was turned back by the victorious troops. Davian would also hire Cupric Byzantium that year to aid in their defense. To ensure that they would not have to fight on 2 fronts at once, Capellan March forces maintained the pressure on the St. Ives commonality. While they were repulsed from Spica, they managed to wrestle control of Hadnol away from Liao. For the second year in a row, the LCAF came out ahead of the DCMS. Port Moresby resisted a second attempt by Kurita to seize control of the system, though nearby Naja could not. 4 planets within the Dieron military district were targeted by Steiner, and all but Al-Nazl were taken. A dozen or so light years away, the Freewells League moved to reclaim Alula Australis, but otherwise the border here was quiet. The Duchy of Andurian proved to be the only real hotspot along the Capellan border in the latter years of the Second Succession War.
It seems like everything's starting to kind of slow down now. Ever since the Cretans lost those 10 regiments on Hesperus, things seem to have just really slowed down. The Cretans have almost completely run out of gas, it seems. I'm just wondering, yeah, Stephanie, exhaustion. Exhaustion is probably the biggest thing. Or more likely, they've just completely run out of eligible troops at this point. I'm just saying.
In 2857, House Humphreys secured Ithaca and Mataskogan, then Veribium and Claybrook the next year.
There we go.
Though the latter was an arduous effort that cost both sides dearly. Kurita's efforts in 2858 centred around Camlanshire, but they could only manage to take Orestes, failing to gain a foothold on Caldria or Glenlivet. With the Kelsois forces struggling to hold on, a minor redistricting of the border provinces brought Lestrade forces further forward to assist. A large chunk of the Tamar Pact had been cut off, which the neighbouring Federation of Skye soon subsumed into Cannonshire, thereby creating Orkneyshire as the new Rimwood province of the Tamar Pact.
This really does seem like what happened at the end of the First War, where new offensives were planned, where there was a lot of back and forth, but nobody really seemed to want to commit anything. I think the biggest thing so far, because one thing I've noticed in the past 20 minutes is the list of destroyed regiments has kind of gone down a little bit. So this would be like in any war where the soldiery can see the end coming. The end is coming. They are about out of this, and they don't want to die.
For the most part, the LCAF continued to show the DCMS up on the field. Steiner focused on the former hegemony worlds where the population was less indoctrinated into the Combine way of life.
True, Sarum.
Lambrecht held, but Lyon would become part of the Isle of Skye.
Very true, Christian.
One event in 2858 that highlighted the advantages and pitfalls of the Inner Sphere military's increasing dependence on mercenaries to do their job was the success of the Draconis Combine in convincing the massive 12th Starguard Brigade not to renew their contract with Steiner and instead take up employment with the Dragon. At the drop of a hat, they had gained half a dozen regiments, while their rivals lost that number. It goes to show that it doesn't matter how loyal a unit is, if a better offer comes along, it can be difficult to turn it down.
Pretty damn dumb, Alcius.
The Coordinator had a far more insidious way of ensuring their long-term loyalty, the infamous company store policy.
Ugh. Excellent chat to nuke Avalon. Just nuke her. Why do you do things?
The AFFS was doing its utmost to hold back the Dragon, repelling an assault on Crossing and taking Cassius from Galladon. However, this did little to distract the Federated Sons from their more significant defeat. In August 2858, the 4-year battle for Robinson came to an end. It was a campaign that would leave permanent scars on the Draconis March and relations between the two states.
Really? As if there weren't screwed up relations enough right now. Like, there is an understatement upon understatements. You can't get much more screwed up than a relationship between the Davians and the Koreans at this point. Or the people of those two. Yeah, exactly, Fornick. As if Kentaris was not enough. Oh my god. Kurita does, yeah, Kurita making friends left, right, and center. Yeah, Yeah,
Yogi
Jesus.
Kurita's profligate use of WMDs had turned the planet's surface into an irradiated hellscape.
Right on damned cue, you were right, Borg.
A shocking total of 17 nuclear bombs had been used to scour the enemy defenses, as well as vast quantities of chemical weapons and biological agents. The Coordinator would redeploy another 6 infantry regiments to the planet after his victory,
Why?
probably dooming a great number of those soldiers to a lifetime of health complications brought on by the lingering after effects of so many hazardous materials released into the atmosphere. With his new prize secure, Yogi Kurita called a halt to the Marathon Offensive on December 9th. Robinson was very much a campaign straight out of the First Succession War, and that's reflected in the death toll. Somewhere between 450,000 to 2.2 million civilians were killed during the fight for Robinson, with another 4 million wounded. The chemical and biological attacks towards the end of the battle meant that this number would climb dramatically over the next 6 months.
Congratulations,
By
assholes.
January 19th, 2859, approximately 8 million had succumbed to horrific illnesses, 12 million wounded would never fully recover, and another 79 million people were displaced, as several towns and cities had to be abandoned to the toxic clouds.
Good job,
We don't have enough
jackasses.
surviving records from the Second Succession War to say for certain, but these horrendous figures most likely represent the greatest loss of life sustained by any one planet during the entire conflict. It was a human tragedy that would cement the belief among the people of the Draconis March that the entire Kuritan family was evil beyond redemption.
They're not wrong. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. At this point, when you start ordering WMDs to be dropped on every single fucking planet, you can't really argue when people start saying you're evil. I'm just saying. It's kind of a no fucking brainer at this point. Do the people of the Federated Suns just simply have the skulls with titanium blast plating on them? Like, it would only take you doing it one time to me, or even threatening it. I don't have to ask myself, hey, that Kim Jong-un dude, is he an evil bastard? Yes, he the fuck is. Why? Because he keeps on threatening to nuke everything. He hasn't even had to drop it. I'm just like, yes, I know, you're an evil little bastard. Would I nuke a planet if I had one towel? Are we talking a planet that doesn't have anything else on it? Or what are we talking about here? Is there some use I can get out of the planet? Could we kill the towel and plow them into the soil for fertilizer? It's just a question. Yeah, even Sven, even Genjiro stopped using nukes! Even the guy that was losing his fucking mind stopped using nukes. What's wrong with these people? Maybe they're evil, you fucking think? It's like, seriously, the Federated Suns over there, like, you know, guys, I'm beginning to believe that the Koreans might be, they might be a little bit on the bad side. The rest of the damn universe is like, you fucking think, jackass? The Taurians are just sitting back and laughing in nuclear hellfire. Exhaustion. Yeah, there we go.
In the latter half of the Second Succession War, the Freewells League was undergoing a slight shift in its internal boundaries.
Slight.
During the ComStar War, the Marik Commonwealth had been outvoted in Parliament by rival power blocks, seriously hampering the Captain General's efforts to halt their enemy's advance and counteract the effects of ComStar's interdiction. This was something which his son Gerald Marik was eager to avoid a repeat of, should he ever find himself in the same boat. The Principality of Regulus had long been a thorn in his family's side. the shift from House Salage to Cameron Jones back in the 27th century having done little to change that state of affairs.
Sir, I understand the First Lord status, I understand all of that stuff, but you want to know what the difference is between a First Lord who you call a dick and a trash noble you call a dick? Very little to the average person. The average person doesn't care who dropped the nuke. It's just some asshole just dropped a nuke on me. I mean, I don't care if you're the First Lord or not. I mean, I don't care. Yeah, I just don't care.
The Duchy of Andurian had typically supported the Great House, but could potentially become another rival in the future, as they had grown more than any other province during the succession wars. Work to destabilize these provinces have resulted in Regulus losing 10 systems, while another 8 declared their independence from Andurian. The Marik Commonwealth, by contrast, picked up another pair of worlds closer.
I know, Sven. I know. You're sitting there, you're having a shitty day, the wife won't stop yelling at you to cut the grass, the kids sit there got in trouble at school, so they're going to be home for 2 days. Your wife's pissed off about that. The dog just pissed on your favorite pair of shoes. And then some asshole drops a nuke on you. That day accelerated quickly.
To Terra, increasing its number of MPs in Parliament. 2859 saw the end of the almost 2-decade-long La Reconquista effort by the Grand Duchy of Oriente. Overall, it had been a tremendous success, but its final year was not so special. Anagasaki and Chengdu turned them back, and while A and Leal were taken, the Capellans enacted a scorched earth policy as they withdrew from the latter. Andurian forces also returned to Aquagia in 2859,
Don't give Avalon any ideas.
years after they had abandoned it during the ComStar War. To their surprise, they found that FWLM Special Forces had been leading a popular uprising for pretty much that entire time. The population welcomed the League back as liberators. Loss of territory wasn't Liao's only concern, as Narhol's raiders returned back to Steiner employ after a decade of unhappy service with the Confederation. This loss was softened by the addition of Lothar's Fusiliers to the ranks of the Chesterton Reserves during the 2850s, the last mech regiments to be raised from scratch by the CCAF during the war. On January 20th, 2859, Elizabeth Steiner turned 19. Her birthday celebration saw the triumvirate peacefully pass control of the realm down to their young ward.
Yay!
To thank them for their faithful service, the new Archon immediately gave them tasks she knew would keep them well away from court, quite content to never see Henri de Calidor or Eliza Atten ever again. The former was given command of the 23rd Lyran Regulars, the only new mech regiment the LCAF would raise during the Long War. The latter was given the Herculean task of overseeing the relief effort for those displaced by foreign aggression. Rebecca Morgan had always supported her daughter, and you can see Elizabeth's gratitude in the contrasting job she gave her mother compared to the others, protecting endangered species with the Environmental Services Department.
Oh, that's nice.
A few tit-for-tat actions continued along the Commonwealth Combine border in 2859, even after the end of the Marathon Offensive. The former took Atria, the latter Basiliano. The DCMS also contracted the Wildcards to supplement their abilities in the region.
I know Hannibal, right?
2860 would see a pair of high-profile casualties for the two successor states. A raid on Sacklin may have failed to achieve their intended objectives, but it did result.
One member of the Triumvirate go to war. The second one, deal with all these pissed off homeless people who just got nuked by Koreans. Third, go pet pandas. It's like, great!
Result in the death of the Lyran hero Henri de Calidor in only his first battle.
Ugh.
Further forward, the War Griffins had just arrived on Krella after their contract with the Federated Suns had been terminated prematurely. In the final months of 2858, they had conducted a reconnaissance raid on Robinson to assess enemy strength and deployments. The intel was found to be sorely lacking when the AFFS returned to the planet in early 2860, and the War Griffins took the lion's share of the blame for the way the counterattack unfolded. Their situation went from bad to worse when the Kuritans arrived on Krella in March. The Mercs were swiftly overwhelmed, but did manage to exact some vengeance on behalf of Steiner when they killed the despised Hugai Kurita.
Ooh.
The few surviving mercenaries fled to the periphery to join up with Hendrik Grimm. One of the most exposed systems along the border was the Tamar Domain's capital. Thinking that an invasion was likely imminent, the LCAF dispatched reinforcements to the planet and the staging grounds on nearby Severin. What they had not anticipated was for a trio of Kuritan mech regiments and 7 more conventional to hit Sacklin again for the second time that year. There was little hope of repelling such a large force. The Kuritans further expanded their salient by taking Pilakua by year's end. 2 of the most contentious systems along the Marik-Steiner border were again the site of battles in 2860. The Freewells dispatched the Eridani Light Horse to raid Judonay, but this may have weakened their position further along the border. The Lyrans evened the score later that year when Magrez once again switched sides.
Where's Bell in all this?
Fresh defeat at the former Draconis March capital forced Prime Marshal Peter Davian to call a halt to operations along the Kuritan border. While the AFFS reorganized for a much larger effort to reclaim the Robinson Bulge in a few years' time, First Prince Michael Davian tasked Peter with launching another offensive against House Liao. Operation Winter Garden aimed to create a large salient deep into the Capella commonality. The campaign got off to a strong start. The flag of the Federated Suns was soon flying over half a dozen new worlds. On September 19th, the Prime Marshal led an assault force of 2 battlemech and 8 conventional regiments to Camel. This should
Alcius, for defending your territory, is having strongly defended borders or strongly defended main force in the main sector better? Borders. Borders are going to be borders are going to be it. Okay, borders are going to be what you would rather have, because you see what happens to all these salients.
should have been an overwhelming force, as they had
Which house is in the best position at the moment? Surprisingly enough, the Freeworlds League.
yet to come up against any significant resistance. As the dropships descended through atmosphere, they came under withering anti-air fire. Among those hit by the AA that smashed into the planet's surface was Davian's command vessel, throwing the entire operation into complete disarray.
Oh.
As the Capellan Confederation has steadily lost ground to both of its neighbours during the Succession Wars, the realm had become increasingly narrow. Chancellor Lorelei Liao wisely saw an opportunity in this apparent vulnerability. She could hold much of her strength in reserve along the centre line of the Confederation, and manoeuvre them to whichever front they were needed far quicker than Davian or Marik would have considered possible in their own territory.
Supply lines are shorter.
This is exactly what caught out Peter Davian, whose attack group had run face first into those reinforcements.
Yep.
The 3 attacks that were scheduled to begin after Camel were immediately called off, as the First Prince raced to restore some semblance of order to the campaign. In mid-October, the newly christened Operation Jade Castle struck again, this time against Alcyone and Daniels, 2 planets that the Federated Suns had taken all the way back in 2833 as part of Operation Leopard. With momentum on their side, the Capellans looked like they might be about to get the upper hand for the first time since the early days of Operation Celt. In their hour of deliverance, fate intervened in the most cruel way.
Oh?
Word of their success made it back to the Jade Palace on Cyan on October 18th.
Oh boy.
The next morning, Lorelei Liao suffered a stroke. She died 11 days later.
F in chat.
Whatever destabilizing effect the loss of the Prime Marshal had had on the AFFS, because of the structure of the CCAF, which places the Chancellor at the head of all operations and makes use of no ranks above Colonel, Lorelli's death at this crucial moment was so much worse. With no children to inherit her position, the Prefectorate selected her brother Dainmar to be the next Chancellor, though his lack of military experience was a serious concern.
You know, every single time you guys made fun of the clans for going all the way back to their homeworlds when the basically the King Khan was killed, and you have to go all the way back there to start up some shit. I mean, they got it honest. I mean, I'm just saying, they got it honest. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, they're only following tradition that has been handed down for hundreds of years, apparently. Exactly, Alcius. There's no point. This is, the Ilkhan. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. But there you go.
To cap it all off, Peter Davian had survived the crash landing and managed to evade capture.
Nice.
His task force was almost at the point of surrender when he waltzed back into their camp and took charge of the situation. The odds were stacked against them, but they were given a reprieve when Dainmar withdrew his forces from Camel back to a secondary defensive line, a major blunder to begin his term of office. With Jade Castle abandoned and Winter Garden now back under the Prime Marshal's control, the Confederation was facing a catastrophe. Gerald Marik's campaigns had seen some limited success in recovering their lost worlds, but the mood in the Freewells League was starting to shift as those in power questioned whether continuing the conflict was still prudent. The Captain General swore that he would not rest until all of their territory was reclaimed. Gerald's insistence on pursuing a course of war at a time when the Inner Sphere was beginning to seek a way out of it may have been his undoing. On March 3rd, 2861, he died suddenly from a heart attack. So goes the official story. There have been several suggestions over the years that members of Parliament took action to remove the Captain General, though these rumours are unsubstantiated.
There we go again.
Marik's death was exactly the kind of opportunity that Raymond...
This is the perfect picture. A Marik dies and there's ComStar holding the rave. There you go.
Karpov had been hoping for when he convinced Gerald's son Maxwell to join the ComStar Order. If he returned to stake his claim, Karpov could maneuver a puppet ruler into control of one of the successor states. But curiously, this never took place.
Oh my god.
Various histories of the era contradict each other on Maxwell's time of death. Some state that he had predeceased his father, potentially after coming to blows with the First Circuit over his disinterest in the Captain General's position. As such, it was left to his aunt Philippa Marik to step forward in his place. Undeterred by the missed opportunity, Raymond would welcome another young Marik scion into the Order the next year, Elizabeth Marik. Philippa's policy on the matter of peace was much more agreeable to the war-weary populace, the polar opposite of her brother Gerald's. She too has often been named as one of the conspirators against him, but again, no evidence of foul play has ever been uncovered.
Oh yeah, no evidence of foul play whatsoever. You know, we investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing. Imagine my shock.
On the topic of succession, ComStar was also undergoing changes to bring it more in line with Raymond Karpov's vision for a technocratic secret society. The Doctrinal Edict of 2861 had given the Primus the power to name a chosen successor, as well as formalize the stratified organizational hierarchy. At the bottom were the Acolytes, then Adepts and Precentors above them. All other legacy roles were phased out. The First Circuit, which had expanded to 10 members back in 2857, remained the ruling council, answering only to the Primus. The militant ROM continued to expand, especially following the Vedder affair. Loki agent Rosemary Vedder had infiltrated ComStar 3 years prior and rose to the rank of Adept, sending highly classified intel back to the Commonwealth.
Black Wolf, you have a
time.
nice night. Black Wolf, you, the missus, and the kids have a great night, alright?
More than 3 dozen other foreign agents in lower positions were discovered after the crackdown. Kurita's company store policy, their insidious plan to trap mercenaries in inescapable debt, leaving them no option but to sell off their units and sign up as regulars, had netted them a number of cheap acquisitions over the decades. Despite their growing reputation for underhandedness, it did not deter others from signing up with the successor state, such as the Isengrim in 2861. Another of their recent acquisitions had been the 12th Starguard just 3 years prior, but already there had been problems. The Rat Frags, one of the regiments within the mercenary brigade, had broken contract the previous year, citing a lack of payment. Tensions only escalated from there, until in 2861, the entire Starguard mutinied and returned to the Lyran Commonwealth, robbing Kurita of that same strength they had been so pleased to acquire. If there is a lesson to be—
pay the people that you hired that currently have more fucking guns than you.
learned, it is that once a mercenary command has reached sufficient size, it can be almost impossible to stop them from leaving if that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
This loss did not deter them, however, and the consensus within the DCMS is that the company store program has been a net positive for the military. With Kurita still firm advocates of the policy to the present day 3025, it remains to be seen whether this will cause issues for them again in the future.
By the way, guys, not sponsor segment, but if you get a chance to get yourself some of this stuff right here, they sell these at gas stations and stuff like that. These are some of the best candles you're ever going to have. This is so... It's awesome, okay? It's awesome. I don't know if you guys have had these. This is not sponsored. This is just the old man telling y'all about something he likes.
The Federated Suns juggernauts began moving again in 2861, this time with a greater focus on the St. Ives commonality. The 2 planets they had lost to Jade Castle were welcomed back into the Federated Suns, and another 5 border systems were added to the Capellan March.
Nice.
Daymar Leal seemed incapable of organising any sort of defence. By the mid-year, Michael Davian signed off on a bold plan to bring the war to a decisive end. A pair of daring raids were to be carried out by 2 of the best units within the AFFS, the 7th Cruisers Lancers and Davian Assault Guards. Both understood that this could be a one-way trip. MIIO Intelligence placed the Chancellor in one of 2 locations, Cyan or St. Ives. Making use of uncolonized systems, they would journey to their targets and attempt to take Daymar hostage.
Caden,
The
you have a
deeper
great
of the
night,
2
bud.
strikes took place first, shocking the Confederation that their enemy could reach their capital unopposed. It was the first time since Kurita had carried out skirmishing aerospace raids in the New Avalon system that a successor state capital had been targeted, and not since the famous Tamar Tigers raided Luthien back in the opening months of the First Succession War had troops made landfall. The Crucis Lancers did not find their quarry and promptly departed before the overwhelming Capellan forces could corner them. On July 5th, the Davian Guards arrived at St. Ives aboard FSS Resolve. Leading them in this reckless action was Michael's own daughter, Melissa Davian.
Dad, I'll show you! Lee. I think this is the reason why Laos switched to backstabbery as their primary tactic. They literally lost the ability to wage conventional warfare. Dude, the Liao at this point has lost a good bit of territory. To the point where their capital is within raiding range. That's bad. That's excessively bad. Thank you, Lee.
Splitting her forces, she held back the Chancellor's personal guard while the rest of her regiment rained fire on the Liao Palace where Daymar was sheltering. The Chancellor's only hope was that the Capellan Hussars could break through before the assault guards breached his bunker. They very nearly did when they isolated Melissa from the rest of her unit. But before they could capitalize, Lieutenant Colonel Zolanda Dugan charged their position. She gave her life to ensure the safety of the Davian air,
Oh my
one of only
God.
2 mechs the AWFS lost during the mission. Though the assault guards were driven back from the Chancellor's palace, Dainmar was so shaken that he dispatched a messenger to New Avalon in order to discuss terms for a ceasefire. The First Prince was caught off guard by the Liao proposal. He wisely held off issuing a response until after the Winter Garden attack scheduled for January 2862 had gone ahead, netting 2 more easy victories. But after
The Liao reached out with a please no bully message. That is what that was. Oh my God. Michael Davey's looking at that message like, you weren't made for this kind of hell. This is like the Capellans are tapping, man. The Capellans are tapping. Oh man. He heard those mechs outside firing weapons and he started tapping. Yeah.
After a Capellan raid hit Redfield, he saw that the time was right to send a reply.
Yeah, Christian,
His
you
starting
sure
point in the
did.
negotiations was a demand that he knew no successor lord could possibly accept. He wanted the Capellan government to recognize Federated Sun's authority over not just the Winter Garden conquests, but every system that had changed hands since the fall of the Star League. Dainmar agreed at once, handing Michael a shocking political victory.
Whoa! Whoa! Damn! What? Oh man. He ain't gonna make it, guys. Effing chat, he's already gonna die. He's already gonna die. He's dead. He is dead. This is worse than what Marik did. This is worse than what Marik did, okay? Effing chat, he's already fucking dead, okay? He's already dead. I don't even need to... Oh my God. Yeah, he unlocked the Soul Pants achievement. Oh my God. Toby, the scion of House Davion just made the scion of... He squealed. He squealed, uncle. Oh my God. Yeah, he had him by the heart and all he took was his balls. Yeah, it's over. It's over. Liao is done. Yeah, it is a good day to be a Federated Sun. Intergalactic armbar. Dude, not even that. Like, he basically shoved Liao against the lockers and took his fucking lunch money, his belt, his hat, everything.
The peace agreement brought the Second Succession War to an
I understand that, Valnero, but damn.
end for the worlds along the Davian-Liao
True,
border.
Sarah.
With their flanks secure, the Federated Suns began
This is the single most straight-out victory against another house that I've seen so far in these Succession Wars. All right? Even the Turians went down swinging. The Capellans just... The Turians went down absolutely swinging. The Capellans just tapped. Oh, God. They didn't just tap. They flat out. Oh, my God.
began redeploying their entire military to face off against the Draconis Combine.
And that's something the Draconis Combine can't have. That's going to hurt.
The DCMS were racing
Very
to take
true,
what they could
Cleodora.
from the Commonwealth before the Rimwood threat grew too great to continue. With aid from the Nightmares Merc unit, Alhilla and Karbala fell to the Dragon, but on October 19th,
Now this does put Liao in a better position than they were about 5 seconds ago, because now they can focus their entire military against the Federated, not the Federated Suns, but the Freewells League. But still, oh my God!
Coordinator Miyogi Kurita called a halt to all military operations. The supply situation was critical for many of their frontline units, and an attack on Emporia staged by the Razelhague regulars had to be abandoned.
Oh, Koreans are done fighting? The Federated Sons haven't heard the bell, bitch!
Steiner's other border was still under threat in 2862, as Magrez yet again became the site of a battle. The Eridani Light Horse returned to capture Ilion, but there had been so much destruction wrought on that planet that it was virtually uninhabited by war's end.
Great.
Soon after, Captain General Philippa Marik also ordered her troops to cease combat operations, after agreeing to an armistice between her family and Steiner's, though not necessarily their states.
Okay.
Philippa's reasons for calling for peace were more than just appeasing her parliament and the sentiment of her people. Despite the humiliating terms Dame Marliao had agreed to with Davian, his military could now at least focus on the Freewells League. The newest regiment of the Chesterton Reserves landed on Ling and began to lay waste to any targets of opportunity. Efforts by the Orloff Grenadiers to drive them off.
Hold on a second, guys. Hold on a second. Guys, I'm about to get into a bad patch of weather here. 1 second.
60-mile-per-hour wind.
Yeah, I'm about to get into a bad patch of weather here. Hold on a second.
Yeah, it's gonna hit us dead on.
1 second. Oh, yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. It's gonna go until 3 a.m.
3 a.m.? Okay.
Oh man, did you look at the radar?
No, I haven't
Look
looked
at
at
this.
I'm looking. Give me a second.
Yeah, I got it on my phone.
Guys, we're gonna get hit here in about...
Yeah, it's like yellows and pink.
Well, it's not technically as bad as it could be, because I've seen worse hit
Well,
here.
it's the wind that's gonna make it bad.
We're gonna get hit here in probably about, let me see, 10 minutes. If I lose power, we're gonna finish this tomorrow. Okay, if I lose power, I'll just drop out and we'll finish this tomorrow. But
Well, we don't lose power. You're supposed to play games on your new computer tonight.
I know, right? But right now it does look like we're gonna get hit by something. I'm not sure if it's gonna be bad or not. But yeah, we will. I'm gonna try to stay online. Hey, thank you, Repressed. Have a great stream, my friend. Hope you're doing better than I am. I was just diagnosed with CHS. What's CHS? Embracing for major lifestyle changes. Hope the animal and the lady are doing well. 1
Want
second.
me to look it up?
Oh, it's 71. It's not that severe, bud. It's not that severe. Weather here is not like it can get bad. The most that I got to worry about is losing power. That's what I got to worry about.
Cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome.
Oh man, I am so sorry, dude. I am so sorry.
Oh man.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Repressed. I really am.
Oh, that sounds rough.
No, guys, we're fine. We're fine. We're completely fine. Don't worry about me. Like,
Most comp happens and it happens all the time. We lose
yeah,
power.
we've had severe storms here before. What's going to happen is in probably about 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to get hit by a heavy squall line. Now, don't worry about tornadoes nearly so much here. I'm in a very, very mountainous region. We're not going to get them nearly as badly. The worst that's going to happen is I will lose power. If I do lose power, I won't be able to send out an alert on my cell phone or anything like that. You'll just see the stream go off. and I will let you guys know when I'm back up and stuff like that. I've lost power at this house about 6 times since I moved here. And it's mostly from trees falling down. It really is. Or people hitting poles. It just...
What is that thing they hit? The transformer?
Well, when they hit a pole with a transformer on it, there were during the ice storm, there was a big problem with that.
Was I with you when we saw that transformer blow up the road?
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Repressed. God, dude, I'm so sorry to hear that. Dude, I'm so sorry to hear that, man. I really am. Captain Commander, I am actually going to... Me and the hospital are one of the main things we're going to get in about... At the end of the year is going to be a generator for out here.
Yeah, full house generator.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Lee, for a emergency power supply to protect your NPC. Oh, I already have that, Lee. I have that. I have a small emergency power supply. A couple of other things here. We're wanting to get a generator that'll kick on right when it goes off, because power does get lost up here because a lot of the power lines go to the woods. And especially when we had the ice storm during the winter months up here, limbs were falling, trees were falling once every few days. It really just kind of sucked. But luckily we were on gas heat and we were fine.
Can I run mine for one more second and then come back?
No, you can't. Hold on a second.
I gotta get something early first.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Oh my God, where is it? There it is. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, Repressed, I'm hoping that you're gonna feel better soon, dude. That really sucks. Alcius, you have a nice night. We're gonna finish this out, guys. Yes, I know you do. I know you do, Alcius. And it's good that you've been converted into a custodian. It's good. It's good. You will be fine, my guy. You will be just fine. All right, let's jump back into this.
Ended in disaster. Only after the Fusiliers seized a great wealth of spare parts for themselves did they depart.
What'd you say?
I got it.
You got it. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Grab them real quick.
Yep. Yeah, that Liao's days are very numbered.
By the dawn of 2863, it was clear that the war was winding down. The final moves came in the vicinity of Terra. The Marik militia were already risking the tenuous ceasefire with Steiner when they launched a raid on Capellan, while a larger Liao task force took control of the capital of the Syrian Concordance. The Federation of Sky were able to seize control of 2 more systems from the Kuzu prefecture. The very last gasp of the Second Succession War came in October 2863, when the famed stealths led a counterattack against the Kuritan occupation of Sacklin. Control of the fabled unit had passed to Raymond Winfield, with the 2nd Battalion under the command of former starlet Angela Franks, the famous Black Pearl.
One last ring.
The Combine's new defensive posture served them well, inflicting heavy casualties on the stealths. A flanking attack nearly destroyed
Joe Rogan says hi.
Hi!
the unit outright.
Thanks, Joe Rogan.
But Franks intervened at a crucial moment, stopping the advance almost single-handedly.
Nice.
It cost Angela her life when the enemy landed a hit on our cockpit that took the head of our battlemaster clean off. As the enemy mechs advanced on our retreating unit, the Black Pearl seemingly returned from beyond the grave to fire one more weapon salvo, killing the Kuritan commander, causing the DCMS to rout. Sacklin was secure, as was Angela Frank's legacy. The stealths would ultimately be disbanded for the final time after their victory on Sacklin, passing into legend themselves. Winfield was made Duke of Treeline, and the planet was later renamed after him. His descendants today lead an LCAF regiment that maintains many of the traditions and combat doctrine of their ancestors, operating out of a planet which had once belonged to the Rimworld's Republic that had first birthed the stealths.
Nice.
With this battle's conclusion, operations came to a halt along all the successor state borders. By December 2863, few of the great houses had managed to reach an agreement or sign an official ceasefire, but for all intents and purposes, the Second Succession War was over.
Oh my god. Alright, it's Butcher's Bill time, guys. True, Stephanie. Yes, sir, I'm true.
After more than 35 relentless years of carnage, the Second Succession War finally ran out of steam in 2863, grinding to a shuddering halt along all fronts. Just as was the case with its predecessor before, this did not happen because of any strong desire for peace, but simply because the great houses could no longer muster enough strength to wage war on one another. As soon as the firing stopped, aid and recovery teams were dispatched to the frontier worlds who had again been scarred by the depredations of war. For many, it was already too late.
In other words, all of Capellan space.
Though fewer planets have been subjected to orbital bombardments or mass WMD use, for those colonies that were hanging on by a thread after the first conflict,
Very
the
true,
commencement of the Second Succession War so soon after ruined any slim chance of survival. Since 2830, another 218 systems were abandoned or had their populations completely eradicated,
Oh my.
and only 2 new colonies had been founded by people fleeing to the periphery.
Good game.
Just as had happened before, the worlds lying outside the Inner Sphere were not spared the horrors of the Succession Wars, despite taking no part in the fighting, as almost half of those abandoned planets had been part of the periphery. Most sources shy away from giving an estimate for the total number of casualties sustained during the Second Succession War, due to the complications with determining which of the 2 post-Starleague conflicts are to blame for the countless people who died of starvation or disease. What little consensus there is tends to settle on a loose hundreds of millions dead, though how high that goes is anyone's guess.
True.
The number of people wounded or displaced is surely in the billions. However obscene the death toll might have been, it was insignificant compared to the First Succession War,
True.
and so those in power were able to disregard it with worrying ease.
That's something that I knew was going to be the case, because the lack of warships were going to make it... You know, it's kind of hard to bombard somebody from orbit if you don't have anything to bombard from orbit. You know?
They were more interested in seeing what several generations of bloody conquest had won them. It's difficult to imagine that any were excited by the reports that soon crossed their desks.
Well, what have we won? You know, 35 years of war? Hold on, tell me. You have won absolutely dick. Unless you're the Capellans, in which case you've learned a lack of... You just don't have a dick anymore. Because the Davians have that.
Even those who had managed to take and hold foreign lands had to face the reality that many planets had been rendered worthless by the fighting. Coupled with the interior worlds now abandoned and the loss of advanced technology they had all suffered, they found precious little to celebrate. Rather than touting any great victories to their people, the Successor Lords simply claimed that vanquishing their enemies was justification enough for so many lives spent, and would likely be the cause for resuming the conflict in the future.
Oh, God.
For as little as the balance in power between the great houses shifted during the early Succession Wars, the Inner Sphere had nonetheless undergone some significant changes in its borders in the 100 years since the Starleague Civil War began. For starters, several states no longer existed. The Terran hegemony had at one time been a star empire of 125 systems, not counting the many shared worlds or periphery outposts. The last vestige of that government, ComStar, held only Terra. The Rimworld's Republic had colonized 245 systems, but lost 86 to Steiner's Operation Ulmerich, a defeat which ultimately brought down the government. Of the Forsaken Worlds, only 68 had managed to eke out a living, including the reborn Oberon Confederation. The rest had either evacuated or starved. The other periphery realms had not been encroached upon by the Inner Sphere, but had nonetheless been forced to abandon several of their colonies. The Magistracy of Canopus and Taurian Concordat had lost 13 each, while the Outworlds Alliance had lost 62.
Oh.
They may have settled one new world, but 8 others had broken away to form their own microstate. Unfortunately, going it alone proved too great a challenge for Trader's Domain, and the fragile alliance would dissolve towards the end of the century. Of the successor states themselves, if any can be considered winners of the last 100 years of conflict, the most likely candidate is the Draconis Combine. They were the only realm to have expanded in both directions, establishing large salients into both of their rivals by the end of the Second Succession War.
Okay.
Reviewing the individual military districts, Benjamin and Razelhaig had both done well, losing almost nothing while making significant gains. Dieron had initially grown dramatically as it absorbed large chunks of the Terran hegemony, but more recently had been losing ground to all 3 of its neighbours. Galadon had seen some changes, but a balance was more or less maintained, whereas the only shift in Pesht had been those systems abandoned over the course of the war. Going from the strongest to the weakest, the Capellan Confederation was unquestionably the biggest loser so far. It had been steadily squeezed by both of its neighbours, and had almost no major successes on the battlefield. Tikhonov may have expanded coreward into the old Terran hegemony, but the Freewells had pressed inwards, and any gains against the Federated Suns reversed.
Oh. Dude. Oh man, they got pounded. That was loud. Yeah.
Sana reclaimed part of Kenyan Marik salient, but Davian had taken a large chunk out of the Spinward side of the region.
That looks like the tide came in.
As they had for the Capella, Cyan and St. Ives commonalities too. The Freewells border had been very dynamic during the Second Succession War, but by the end of the conflict, the situation had more or less reset. Worst affected was Andurian, a region of space that Liao had seemingly only managed to retain control of thanks to the Star League Accords. It and the small Chesterton commonality would soon disappear altogether. The Lyran Commonwealth had mixed fortunes in the early succession wars. Before they had begun, Steiner had taken more territory during Operation Ulmerich than any other realm had managed since. Similar gains were made from the collapsing Terran hegemony. The first war had seen the Bolan Thumb more or less reclaimed, and the job was finished in the second. They had steadily given ground to the Caretans, but had still achieved some victories on that front. The Federation of Sky had proven itself a formidable bastion in the face of aggression from both major enemies, and even the Federated Suns. They were the only province to beat back the Draconis Combine. The Tamar Pact, by contrast, had suffered greatly, and their capital was now perilously close to the border. A Caretan salient had forced them to cede control of the rimward tip of their province to House Lestrade. The Protectorate of Donegal, safely removed from the most dangerous foe, could boast about their strong performances, having gained far more along the rimward flank than they had lost. In 2837, the Freewells League had undergone a hard reset to their succession war progress when the Captain General recalled all his forces from foreign territory in the wake of ComStar's communications interdiction. The hurt kept coming for them over the next 5 years, but they managed nonetheless to make a remarkable recovery by winning back most of those systems in the last 2 decades. The minor provinces in the Terran region had not fared so well. Both the Duchy of Kalidasa and...
Now, take a look at this. Take a look at this. I told you guys the Freewells League was in one of the best positions, period, of this entire thing. Of this war. They were in the best position. Once it got to a certain point in the war. Now, early on, they took a massive L from fighting ComStar, but after that massive L, they recovered really well.
And Border Protectorate had been overrun in the First and Second Wars, respectively. The Syrian Concordance had also lost its capital.
What's going on?
Sorry, I accidentally hit volume.
Oh.
The Marik Commonwealth had unexpectedly found itself on the front lines at one point, but managed to pull through. The Rim and Stuart commonalities had weathered the storm, as had the other minor provinces, Abbey District, Duchies of Graham, Marik and Tamarind, Principality of Gibson, and Regulum Free States. The Principality of Regulus may have avoided any actual conflict, but not so political fights, which saw it lose ground to its Corwood rival. The Grand Duchy of Oriente, who had shifted from the control of one noble house to another, and their vassal Duchy of Orloff, had managed to hold the line in the face of determined Liao assaults, but otherwise had achieved little. This was not so for the Duchy of Andurian, who despite losing several systems to independence movements, had undergone greater expansion than any other province of the Freewells League. The Federated Sons had an extremely tough time of things in the First Succession War, but against all odds had managed to recover most of its territory by war's end. Looking only at the second though, it's a completely different story. They had the best performance of any great house in terms of systems taken. The Draconis March, now based out of the old capital at Tancredi IV, had been one of the most dynamic fronts of the war. In the Woodbine operational area, they had achieved some limited success, pushing up along the Outworlds Alliance border. At the other end, in the new Exeter operational area, they had managed to re-establish a vital Terran corridor. Their most notable loss came at Robinson, where the
Christian, the Freewells League kneecaps itself, however, being many decentralized units makes it resilient as well. ComStar lost a lot of respect for what they did. They indeed did. The Federated Sons gorged on Liao Lomain.
Puritans sowed devastation using their full
true.
range of WMDs. The planet was still under occupation, and Davion was already working on plans to recover it. The Crucis March underwent no significant changes, save for the near disaster back in 2796. Paul Davion's reformation would hopefully ensure such a situation would never occur again. But the greatest change had come along the Capellan March border. Both the Cathal and Usurtis operational areas had proven almost unstoppable as they expanded into Liao territory.
Just a tie.
These victories were tinged with an element of defeat. That region of space had been particularly scarred during the Second Succession War. As the enemy withdrew, they conducted a scorched earth policy, dooming any chances of survival for those left behind. While the common citizens held out hope that the fragile peace would last, and the nobility and politicians wished for time to incorporate their new territory into the realm, for the military leaders of the Inner Sphere who could not see beyond their next battle, all they cared about was the condition of their forces and how soon
the condition of your forces is an absolute shit show. I already know that.
They might be able to launch the next attack, or might expect one coming their way. Even a cursory glance at the 2864 figures makes it clear just how abysmal the situation had become. Understanding the sorry state of affairs on the front line leaves no questions as to why the Successor Lords have been forced to seek a peace, regardless of their own personal leanings. Not since before the Age of War, when they were still proto-states huddling around the Terran hegemony, did the various armed forces of the Inner Sphere have such little available manpower and materiel. Furthermore, the warships that once threatened devastation on any world were now completely extinct. Throughout this series, we have highlighted whenever a battlemech regiment was destroyed in combat, but significant gaps in our knowledge paint a false picture. While we can be relatively accurate in pinpointing the moment at which the majority of Liao and Marik losses happened, the date of destruction for half of Davion's and 3/4 of Kurita and Steiner's mech casualties are unknown.
Oh boy.
Removing those from our map based on recorded 2864 deployments gives us our first accurate snapshot of the Inner Sphere militaries since the start of the war. There is a common misbelief that the 31st century militaries are weaker than at any prior point in the history of the successor states. While it is true that technological sophistication has continued to decline over the past century and a half, the Great Houses have actually been gradually rebuilding their strength in the years since their true nadir at the conclusion of the Second Succession War.
Yeah.
Beginning with the Draconis Combine mustered soldiers.
Alright, get ready, because I know this is horrifying. This is gonna be ugly.
Who at one time had been the preeminent power among the successor states. They had dropped from a high of equivalent strength to over 147 battlemech regiments, to under 119 by the time the Second War began, and continued to plummet down to less than 36.
Oh!
On paper, they had
damn!
92 regiments, but those had an average readiness level of just 40%. Some have described the Liao realm as the sick man of the inner sphere. If there was a point at which they ceased to be on par with the other great houses, it was the Second Succession War. Back in 2786, the humble Capellan Confederation armed forces could field a respectable 118 mech regiments. The rebuilding effort after the First Succession War had brought them back to almost 92. By 2864, if they were to condense what material they had left, they could barely scrape together 21 units. On paper, they could still call on 51 regiments with an average strength of 42%, but with such a paltry offering available, their reduction in territory was perhaps a blessing in disguise when it came to defense. The Lyran Commonwealth Armed Forces began the First War with 120 factory fresh battlemech regiments, and had recovered to more or less that same number, albeit in a much sorrier state of repair. The Second Succession War had highlighted their poor condition, and they could now call on just 35 regiments worth of mechs. A 44% average strength put their 78 listed units slightly above the Inner Sphere norm. The Freewells League military had begun with ever so slightly less, around 119 regiments worth. They began the second conflict with just over 93, but now they too couldn't even field 35 if they were to consolidate what mechs remained to them.
Oh my God.
With a readiness rating of almost 49%, the 72 battlemech regiments were in a fantastic shape for the era.
Once again, I was saying, for some reason, Marik seemed to be the one that was in the best shape. I was saying Marik was the one that seemed to be in the best shape out of all of them. But these losses are catastrophic. These losses are absolutely catastrophic. This is something, even a Krieg regiment would sit there and just flinch at these kinds of losses, especially with nothing gained.
All of them were no doubt raring to go.
Exactly, Andrew.
Perhaps that's what some of the most delusional among their command structure were saying. The armed forces of the Federated Suns was the only realm to get close to the Combine in 2786, but they had taken a far greater beating in that first war, dropping from a high of 140 mech regiments in strength to just over 100 by the time the second began. Better successes in that later conflict meant that they had closed the gap to their rivals. All of their battlemechs combined now amassed to just under 35 units. Their roles still optimistically listed 81 regiments, plus one additional battalion, which together had a combat effectiveness of roughly 43%. For the sake of completeness, we'll mention now that the periphery militaries had declined just as their inner sphere counterparts had. There was no realistic chance of them ever recovering to their reunification war era figures or challenging the great houses. The technological and societal decay was as complete there as everywhere else. Mercenaries had seen their importance grow over the 80 years since Kerensky's departure. Though they had been as much victims of the war as everyone else had, their casualties were offset by an ever-increasing number of them. In 2786, they had accounted for less than 6% of the battlemech numbers across human space.
Right.
By 2864, that figure had risen to over 15% and has continued to increase in the modern era. And that's only counting those units large enough to field at least a battalion. There are an uncountable number of smaller mercenary bands that field a company or less that don't make it into our figures. In contrast to the First Succession War, few formal peace agreements were reached by the warring parties. Only the humiliating concessions made by Danemar Liao and a limited restriction between Marik and Steiner that they would not target the other family's members held back the tide. Naturally, there was a desire by many to foster a stronger state of harmony, and that charge was led by the young Archon Elizabeth Steiner.
Alright, Jason, see you in a second.
Among her immediate neighbours, she found a like-minded individual in Philippa Marik, but Michael Davian was also amenable to talks. On November 9th, 2864, an army of diplomats and civil servants from across the Inner Sphere converged on New Earth, hoping to formally agree an end to the succession wars. The peace talks could not have gotten off to a more inauspicious start.
Let me guess, the Kharitan pulled a sword. I'm just guessing because that's typically what the fuck they wind up doing. Lee, thanks, bud. Wow, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand. Yes. Yeah. The Cappies didn't get burned, they got bodied.
The Draconis Combine ambassador loudly declared that they had no
Did I not just say it? Did I not just say it?
intention of agreeing to a peace, nor did they even have the authority to discuss terms. They were simply there to observe proceedings. James Marik, the Freewells League ambassador, did not share his mother's temperament, losing Steiner the support she was sorely counting on. First Prince Michael Davian had tasked the Federated Sons ambassador, Luther Davian, with getting the others to agree to name him First Lord of the Star League. Such demands had sparked the succession wars in the first place, and were counter to everything Steiner was trying to achieve at New Earth. Lastly, the Capellan ambassador would not accept peace until all worlds taken by their neighbour states were returned to the Confederation.
I'm sorry, you can't ask for that. You can't ask for that. You can't ask for that. It's like... You already gave them away. You already, you know, gave them to the Davians. It's done. It's finished. It's gone.
An impossible request. After 7 weeks of stalled talks, the participants threw up their hands in defeat. Each would return to their realm with news that no peace could be agreed, thus ensuring that a third succession war was all but inevitable. The Kharitan delegate would not even make it that far.
All of them are
he was arrested by the Lyran Intelligence Corps and executed as a spy. There was, of course, one other major faction involved in
Yeah, 71, this is like...
in the Second Succession
This is
War.
amazing.
The one who had instigated the entire conflict in the first place, ComStar. Despite some missteps along the way, for them it had been a tremendous success.
No shit!
Jerome Blake's death set the ball in motion, and his successor Konrad Toyama had worked tirelessly to see his plans unfold on the grand stage.
Lee, thank you, bud. You know, Michael wasn't the worst at Davian leadership. He did do a lot to salvage tech and make Liao cry, but he really, really is hard to like with his heart on for becoming First Lord. It's stupid, dude! It's stupid! It's so ignorant. Like, you walk in there and it's like, you just, like, one of these factions absolutely hates you. Another one of them you made squeal. And the other two couldn't care less about you. Make me First Lord. Just, like, why?
The Order had undergone a dramatic transformation following Raymond Karpov's takeover, to the point where it is almost unrecognizable to the ComStar of Blake's day. The debate continues as to how much of the fanaticism that became a hallmark of the ComStar Order was intended by Jerome when he first concocted the idea. What little we know suggests he only intended to use religion as a means to ensure his organization's survival. Operation Holy Shroud seems to conflict with his stated
Me and you both,
desires.
Stephanie.
Regardless, it is beyond question that ComStar's strength grew considerably over the course of the war. For them, the slaughter unleashed by the Great Houses had brought them one step closer to achieving their destiny.
That's actually a damn good idea, Christian. Give all the lords fancy hats. I'm pretty sure that would stop everything until you put a chair on one of the hats and then they'd all fight over it.
Their influence over the successor
Thank you,
states had
Christian.
grown substantially, to the point where they were almost unchallengeable, and this trend seemed sure to continue. It could be argued that Raymond Karpov was the single most powerful person in existence at that point, puppet master to the petty successor lords, a man who could bend them to his own will. With him at the reins, Blessed Blake's vision of ComStar leading humanity into a new golden age would surely come true.
Alright, let's talk War Pugs. First of all, I didn't lose power, which is great. Right, First Lord and all the hats in a Sharpie. Give them all hats from Dick's Last Resort, it'll be fine. Guys, I can't even. You've been fighting for 34 years. You've been fighting for over 30 years at this point. And you can't send a diplomat that can make a reasonable request? Like, not even one? Not even one? The Steiner is the straight one in the room right now, okay? The Steiner is the straight one in the room right now. And you've got the Freewells League looking smug in the corner. You got the Capellans looking around like somebody's gonna give a fuck about them. Give me back my territory! And everybody's just looking at them like, shut the fuck up, bitch. You got the Caretans, for some reason, like, oh my god. And I told you guys on this one, when I was sitting there looking, every single time a battle popped up, you'd see a regiment get wiped out. Every time there was a regiment or multiple regiments getting wiped out. So this was less of a war, more of a culling. This was just ungodly when it came down to it, in terms of not so much the civilian lives lost and the infrastructure damage, but the technological loss and the loss of military personnel. The meat grinder really isn't even the word for it, Lee. This was less of a meat grinder and more of a nuke that went off in the military world. The amount of technology that was lost, just gone now. It's almost to the point where it looked like they were about to lose the ability to actually wage war just based off scientific loss. They have lost the ability to make warships. They just don't know how to do it anymore. And it's all because of ComStar. Third Secession War starts 2 years after this one ended. That really doesn't surprise me. That really actually does not surprise me. Now, the real winners are ComStars and the mercenaries? Yes. The Amish Paradise approaches? Very true, Sarum. The whole thing, the whole process of this is just one series of just absolute disastrous decisions after another. If even two of the successor states had been reasonable, if even two of them had been reasonable, so Steiner came to the table in order to try to do talks. If even one other house had been reasonable, they could have brought the others in line. They could have brought the others in line. Liao had more of a reason than any to want a treaty to stop the fighting. Liao had more than a reason than anybody because they had taken an absolutely savage beating. Losing 50 worlds to the Freewells to the Federated Suns is just the worst ass pounding I've seen in this setting so far. If even two of them had been reasonable, ComStar would have assassinated them. This is true, Evan. That is very true. Hakans, that's crazy. The whole dynamic of the houses at this point is nothing more or less than a series of absolute beatings. And ComStar's just sitting there laughing in Wizard. I can't even right now. This is... It's getting close to Mad Max here, MN01. At this point, mercenaries make up 15% of the forces. 15% of the forces in the galaxy right now are mercenaries. That's actually an extremely scary number. That's a very scary number. Because mercenaries are going to be better than most of your frontline troops anyway. I mean, that's just saying. And the Cretans are going to pay savagely. I don't think they're going to... This is going to be bad. This was the era of the Charger. I'm not surprised, Matt. I'm not surprised. War Pugs. The second secession war is good. Now I know why why technology sucks. Now I know why mercenary units are so prevalent. That's Thunder, by the way. Still going. There we go. Ooh. Guys, I'm actually going to take off. X in chat for Sven. This was amazing. I do not know what I'm going to be checking out next week. I do not know. Oh yeah, Mad Mergen. Now I definitely know why the clans at the beginning of the invasion absolutely ruffle stomped. I mean, it doesn't even surprise me at all now. It's not even a shock to me. It's not even a shock to me that they ruffle stomp. Sven, I hope to be working with you at some point on my own lore. It's going to be fun. Mercenaries are less likely to murder you if you surrender. The mercenaries are less likely to murder you if you fucking pay them. Okay, I'm just saying. War Pugs, Battletech Tuesday. It's one of my favorite days of the week. I will see you guys next time. Next Tuesday, I don't quite know what we're going to be doing, but we'll figure it out before then. Always pay your mercs, pay your phone bill, and remember, House Davian made Capellan's squeal. It is, oh my god. Ugh. Holy crap. I'll catch you guys next time.
Call me First Lord. Meh.